I still remember that morning as if it were yesterday, the way the light came through the curtains, the quiet hum of the world outside, and the emptiness that had settled inside my chest for years. I had believed that love between a mother and daughter could withstand anything. But that morning proved me wrong. My daughter Emily stood in front of me, eyes blazing, her words cutting deeper than any knife ever could. She said I had ruined her life. Her voice trembled, not from pain but from anger. I could see years of resentment swirling behind her eyes. She looked at me like I was a stranger, and I didn't know how to reach her anymore. I had raised her alone after her father passed away, or at least that's what she had always believed. I had worked 2 jobs, cleaned houses and waited tables just to make sure she had everything she needed. But somewhere along the way, the warmth between us began to fade. When she got older, she wanted things I couldn't give. She wanted the world, and I was only a woman who could barely hold it together. I remember the day she graduated college, the way she hugged me quickly, as if embarrassed by my old dress and worn-out shoes. I didn't mind back then. I thought she'd come around. I thought time would make her understand that love isn't about having everything, but about being there for each other, even when the world isn't kind. But that morning was different. She had stopped pretending she didn't want me around anymore. She said I was the reason. She never felt confident. The reason she didn't have friends growing up. The reason she never felt like she belonged. I stood there trying to hold myself steady, but my heart was trembling. She said she couldn't live her life under the shadow of my sacrifices anymore, that she needed space, that maybe we should stop talking for a while. When she said those words, I didn't cry, not then because mothers learn to hide their tears well. I simply nodded, told her I understood, and walked back to my small room. My knees were shaking as I closed the door and sat down on the edge of my bed. All the years of hard work, every sleepless night, every prayer for her happiness flashed before my eyes, and I wondered how love could turn into something that hurt this much. Later that night, I opened the old wooden box at the bottom of my closet. Inside were letters, photographs, and one small envelope I had never shown her before. It was the letter her father left for me just before he passed away. It wasn't much, just a few words written in his shaky handwriting, but those words carried the truth that Emily never knew, a truth that I had hidden to protect her. He had written that he was sorry that he couldn't be the father she deserved, that he had made mistakes, terrible ones, that had forced him to leave. He wrote that I should never tell Emily the real reason he was gone, because she was too young to understand. He wanted her to remember him as a good man, as a hero, not as the broken man who had walked away from his family and into the darkness of his choices. I had honored his wish for more than 20 years. I never told her that he hadn't died from illness like she believed, but had left after getting into serious trouble that would have destroyed our lives. I carried that secret alone because I wanted to protect her from pain. I didn't realize that in doing so, I had built a wall between us, a wall made of lies and silence. That night, as I sat holding the letter, I wondered if it was time to tell her everything. Maybe she deserved to know the truth. Maybe she'd finally see that I wasn't trying to ruin her life. I was only trying to keep it from falling apart. The next morning I called her. She didn't answer. I sent her a message telling her I wanted to see her, that I needed to talk. She didn't reply. I waited for hours, my hands trembling over the phone. Finally, late that night, she texted back only one word: "Fine." We agreed to meet at her office the next day. When I arrived, her co-workers were busy typing and laughing. I stood there in my plain cardigan, feeling small and out of place. She came out of her glass office looking tired and annoyed. She said she only had 10 minutes, that she had a meeting soon. I smiled softly and told her it wouldn't take long. I reached into my bag and pulled out the old envelope. Her eyes narrowed when she saw it. I could tell she recognized her father's handwriting on the front. "What's that?" she asked, almost whispering. "It's something your father left behind." I said quietly, "Something I should have given you a long time ago." She hesitated for a moment, then took the envelope with trembling fingers. I could see her trying to stay strong. But when she unfolded the paper, her eyes filled with tears. She looked at me, her lips trembling. "Why didn't you show me this before?" she asked. "Because I wanted you to believe he was someone worth loving," I whispered. "I didn't want you to grow up hating him. I thought it would hurt you less this way." For a long moment she didn't say anything, just stared at the letter like it held all the missing pieces of her life. Then she turned away, wiping her eyes. I thought maybe this was the moment she'd forgive me. Maybe we could start over, but instead she said softly, "You should have trusted me, Mom. You should have told me the truth." I nodded because she was right. I had spent my whole life protecting her, but I had never trusted her enough to handle the truth. She walked away that day, and I stood in that office surrounded by strangers, feeling like the world had gone silent around me. That night when I got home, I sat in the kitchen alone with the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock. I didn't know what would happen next, but deep down I felt something shift. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe pain could still lead to healing. I looked at her father's letter one last time before putting it back in the box and whispered into the quiet air, "Maybe now she'll finally understand why I did what I did." I didn't know then that this letter would soon uncover more than just the truth about her father. It would reveal secrets that had been buried for decades, secrets that would test our bond and change our lives forever. That night, Emily didn't call. I waited by the window like I used to when she was a teenager, sneaking out to see her friends. The streetlight outside flickering like it always did, casting soft shadows across the floor. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest until you can barely breathe. I made tea, though I didn't drink it. I just needed something warm to hold on to. My hands were shaking. I didn't know if the letter had made things better or worse. I only knew that something had shifted, something deep and fragile that I couldn't name yet. The next morning, I woke to a knock on my door. I thought maybe it was her, but when I opened it, it was a delivery man holding a small brown package. There was no name on the outside, just my address. I signed for it and sat at the table, turning it over in my hands. Inside, there was another envelope, yellowed, fragile, with a familiar handwriting that stopped my breath. It was my husband's again. I hadn't seen this letter before. The handwriting was unsteady, as if written in haste. My heart pounded. It said, "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. Tell Emily the truth when she's ready. But be careful who you trust. There are people who don't want her to know what really happened." I froze. Be careful who you trust. What did that mean? I thought his mistakes were personal, maybe debt, maybe something foolish. But this sounded different, bigger. I sat back, the room spinning. I had spent half my life protecting Emily from a truth I thought I understood. But now it seemed there was more, something I had missed entirely. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept rereading his words, tracing each letter with my finger. I didn't know who sent that letter or how it had found its way to me after all these years. But I knew I couldn't ignore it. I needed to find out what really happened. The next day I called my old friend Clara. She was the only person who knew a bit about those years. The nights my husband didn't come home, the phone calls from unknown numbers, the strange fear that lived in his eyes before he left. When I told her about the new letter, she went silent for a moment. Then she said something that made my skin crawl. "Maybe it's time you talk to Frank." Frank was my husband's brother. We hadn't spoken in over 20 years. He had always blamed me for his brother's disappearance, said I drove him away. But I knew Frank had his own secrets. He worked with my husband in the same company back then, some kind of small-town construction business that was supposed to build homes but somehow got tangled in something shady. I hesitated, but the next morning I drove out to the edge of town where Frank still lived. His house looked the same, peeling paint, an old pickup truck parked in the driveway, and a wind chime that sang softly in the breeze. When he opened the door, he stared at me for a long moment before stepping aside. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," he muttered. "I didn't think I'd ever come," I said quietly. We sat at his kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee between us, the silence thick and heavy. When I showed him the letter, his face changed. He looked pale, almost frightened. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "It came in the mail yesterday," I said. "No name, no note, just this." He leaned back in his chair, sighing deeply. "You should have kept her in the dark, Mary. You think you were protecting her, but you were just delaying what was bound to come out eventually." "What are you talking about, Frank?" He looked at me with tired eyes. "Your husband didn't just run from debts. He was part of something he shouldn't have been. He tried to stop it when he realized how deep it went. That's why he disappeared. I felt cold all over. Stop what? He hesitated. The company wasn't just building houses. They were using the business to launder money. When your husband found out, he wanted to go to the police. But before he could, they came for him. I stared at him, unable to breathe. So he didn't leave us? Frank shook his head slowly. No, he was trying to protect you both. Tears filled my eyes. All these years I had hated him a little for walking away. I had carried that hurt every single day. To think that he had been protecting us, it broke something inside me. Frank handed me a small box. Inside were old photographs and a folded piece of paper. It was a police report from years ago, an unsolved case. My husband's name was on it. Missing person, presumed dead. There was a handwritten note at the bottom. Closed at family's request. I stared at it, realizing that someone had intentionally buried the truth. Who closed it? I asked. Frank looked away. Your father-in-law. He said it was better that way. I sat there shaking. My father-in-law had always been kind to me, or so I thought. He used to bring groceries when we struggled, helped with bills after my husband disappeared. But now it all made sense. He was keeping me quiet, keeping the story buried. When I left Frank's house that day, I felt like the ground beneath me had shifted. Everything I thought I knew about my life was wrong. My husband wasn't a coward or a liar. He was a man who tried to do the right thing and paid the price for it. That night I called Emily again. This time she answered, her voice soft and distant. Mom, I don't know what to say. That letter, it broke me. Emily, I said, my voice trembling, there's more. There's something you need to know about your father. I told her everything about Frank, about the company, about how her father tried to protect us. At first she didn't believe me, but when I sent her photos of the documents, she went silent for a long time. Then quietly she said, Mom, I think I found something too. What do you mean? I went through Dad's old things, the few we kept in the attic. There's a key taped behind one of the photo frames. I don't know what it's for. A key. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe it was for a storage locker, a safety deposit box, something her father had hidden before he disappeared. We agreed to meet the next morning and find out together. For the first time in years, I heard something in Emily's voice that I hadn't heard in so long. Trust. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the stars fade into dawn, holding on to the thought that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of healing. I whispered into the quiet air, we're going to find you, Robert, and when we do, I'll tell Emily how brave you really were. I didn't know that what we'd uncover next would change everything again. The next morning came heavy with rain, the kind that makes the world look softer but heavier all at once. I stood by the kitchen window holding my coffee, watching drops race down the glass. My hands were trembling, but it wasn't the cold. It was the thought of what Emily had found and the truth we might uncover. When she arrived, she looked different somehow. Her face still carried the traces of tears, but her eyes, they had something new in them, not anger, not blame, just quiet determination. She set her bag down and pulled out the small silver key wrapped in tape. It was old and slightly tarnished, but engraved with something faint, L.R. Storage. I stared at it for a long moment before whispering, L.R. Lake Ridge, that's the storage place near the highway. Emily nodded. I already looked it up. It's still there. We didn't say much after that. We just grabbed our coats, locked the house, and drove through the rain. The whole way there, the only sound was the wipers brushing across the windshield and the soft hum of the engine. I wanted to tell her how proud I was of her, how brave she was for coming with me, but the words caught in my throat. When we reached the storage facility, a tall man behind the counter asked for ID and the key. I handed both over with shaking hands. He typed something into his computer, then looked up with a puzzled expression. That unit's been paid up for over 20 years, he said, but no one's accessed it in all that time. My stomach tightened. Emily and I followed him down the narrow hallway, the air thick with dust and the faint smell of old wood. The man stopped in front of a door near the back. Unit 47, and stepped aside. This one, he said quietly. I slid the key into the lock. My fingers felt numb, but it turned easily, like it had been waiting all this time for me to return. The door creaked open, and a faint, musty smell rushed out. Inside were boxes stacked neatly, each labeled in my husband's handwriting. Documents, photos, personal, for Mary. My breath caught. I walked forward, brushing the dust off the box and lifting the lid. Inside was a thick stack of letters bound with twine, a small cassette tape, and a photograph of Robert holding Emily as a baby. My heart cracked open. Emily leaned over, covering her mouth with her hand. "That's me," she whispered, her voice breaking. We sat down on the cold concrete floor right there in that dimly lit storage unit. I untied the bundle of letters, the paper yellowed and fragile. The first one was addressed to me. "Mary, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it back. But please know I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I had to protect you and Emily, the people I worked for. They weren't who I thought they were. When I found out, it was too late to walk away clean. I couldn't risk them coming after you. So I made a deal. I disappeared, but I left behind everything they didn't want found. It's here, in this unit. If anything ever happens, give this to the police. Trust no one else. Not even Frank." I froze when I read that last line. Not even Frank. The room seemed to spin around me. My mind flashed back to the way Frank had looked when I showed him the letter yesterday. Nervous, pale, too quick to explain everything. I'd trusted him again. I'd believed him. Emily reached for my hand, her voice trembling. "Mom, what does that mean?" "It means," I whispered, my voice breaking, "that your uncle wasn't telling us everything." We searched through the rest of the box. There were documents, contracts, bank statements, photos of men in suits shaking hands, and at the bottom a small black notebook. Inside were pages filled with notes in my husband's handwriting, dates, addresses, names. It wasn't just a record, it was evidence of the illegal deals the company had made. Emily looked at me, her eyes wide. "He was trying to expose them," she said. "Yes," I whispered, "and he paid the price for it." We drove home in silence, the rain still falling like the sky couldn't stop crying either. When we got inside, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the letters spread out before me. Emily made tea this time, something she hadn't done for me in years, and set the cup beside my hand. For the first time in a long time, I saw her not as the little girl I'd failed to protect, but as a woman, strong, brave, standing beside me through something terrifying. She said softly, "Mom, I'm sorry for the things I said, for the way I treated you. I didn't know." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You had every right to feel hurt, Emily. I should have trusted you sooner. But we can't change the past. We can only make sure the truth finally comes out." That night we went through every box, cataloging what we found, taking pictures with Emily's phone. We were determined to take the evidence to the police. But before we could, something happened that changed everything again. Around midnight, there was a knock at the door, a soft, slow knock. I froze. Emily looked at me, fear flickering across her face. We weren't expecting anyone. I told her to stay put and went to the door quietly. When I opened it, the porch light flickered and went out. Standing there in the dark was Frank. His clothes were soaked, his expression tense. "We need to talk," he said. I hesitated. "How did you know where I live now?" He didn't answer right away. He glanced past me into the house, then lowered his voice. "Mary, please, just let me in. You don't know what you've done." My heart raced. "What I've done? What are you talking about?" He looked over his shoulder, then stepped closer. "You found the storage unit, didn't you?" I said nothing. His eyes narrowed. "They're watching, Mary. You have to destroy whatever's in there before it's too late." Emily appeared behind me, her voice firm. "We're not destroying anything." Frank's face changed. His voice grew desperate. "You don't understand. Your father, he made enemies, dangerous ones. If they know you have that box, they won't stop until they get it." I felt the room tilt again. Every word he said felt half true, half lie. I didn't know which part to believe. "Why should we trust you?" Emily asked sharply. Frank hesitated. Then quietly he said, "Because your father didn't die the way they said he did. They staged it. I helped cover it up." Dee at her, tears spilling down my face. "What do we do now?" she whispered. I held her hand, squeezing tight. "We do what your father couldn't finish," I said quietly. "We tell the truth, no matter what it costs." Neither of us knew that by morning our lives would change forever again, and that someone was already watching from the shadows. The night after Frank's warning felt endless. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick, heavy with the kind of silence that makes you listen for sounds that aren't really there. Emily couldn't sleep, and neither could I. We sat in the living room with the lights off, the soft ticking of the old clock filling the space between us. Every shadow outside felt like it was watching us. Every creak in the floorboards made my heart jump. I kept thinking about Frank's words. They're watching, you need to go. I wanted to believe he was only being paranoid, but deep down I knew he wasn't. My husband had written that same warning in his letter all those years ago. Be careful who you trust. Emily was sitting on the couch, her laptop open. She'd been going through the photos we took of the documents from the storage unit, her eyes scanning every word like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Mom, she said softly, look at this. I leaned closer. She pointed to a letterhead on one of the documents. Stonemark Development Corporation. It was the same company my husband and Frank had worked for. They're still active, she said. Same name, same address, just a different owner listed now. Who's the owner? I asked, my voice tight. She scrolled down the page and froze. Frank Lawson. The air seemed to leave the room. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, the world spinning around that one name. That can't be, I whispered. Emily turned the screen toward me, her voice trembling. He owns the company now, Mom, the one Dad tried to expose. My stomach twisted. Everything made sense now. Why Frank had told me to destroy the evidence. Why he'd shown up that night. Harper nodded slowly. And now you've brought me exactly what he was trying to give me. He leaned forward. But you need to understand, if this company is still active, then someone has kept it alive for a reason. They won't let this go easily. Before I could reply, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and silenced it. Then he looked at me. You two need to stay somewhere safe tonight. Don't go home. I'll start digging through this quietly. Emily and I left the station with our hearts pounding. The whole drive to the motel, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. Every car behind us felt too close. Every glance in the rearview mirror made my stomach twist. At the motel, we checked in under my maiden name. Emily was trying to act calm, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I pulled her into my arms and whispered, We'll get through this. Your father's truth will finally come out. That night I barely slept. Around 3 a.m. I heard something outside, a faint sound like footsteps on gravel. I sat up and moved to the window. A black car was parked across the street, engine running, no headlights. I froze, heart hammering. I woke Emily, my voice barely a whisper. Pack your things, we're leaving. We slipped out the back door, got into our car, and drove off without looking back. The car behind us pulled out too. My hands gripped the wheel tight as we turned down the dark country road. Mom, Emily said, her voice trembling, they're following us. I know, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Hold on. We turned off onto a dirt path that led to an old bridge. I remembered it from years ago, half broken, barely used. I turned off the headlights and killed the engine. The black car passed by, its taillights glowing faintly before disappearing into the night. For a long moment we sat in silence, just listening to the rain starting again. Emily reached over and took my hand. Mom, she whispered, Dad really died trying to save us, didn't he? I nodded slowly, my throat tight. He did, but we're not going to let his sacrifice be for nothing. We spent the rest of the night in the car, the rain tapping gently against the roof. I thought about everything we'd lost, but also everything we'd found. Truth, courage, and each other. By morning, Detective Harper called. His voice was tense. Mary, you were right. There's something big here. But you need to be careful. Someone at the department leaked your visit. They know you came to me. My blood ran cold. Emily stared at me as I hung up. What does that mean? She asked. It means, I said softly, we can't trust anyone now. Outside, the morning light broke through the clouds, golden and sharp, touching Emily's face. She looked scared but strong, just like her father once did. I squeezed her hand and whispered, This ends with us. We're going to finish what he started. But deep down I knew the storm had only just begun. The sun was rising, but it didn't feel like morning. The sky was heavy with gray clouds that looked ready to burst again. Emily and I were still parked near that old bridge, cold and exhausted, our eyes red from a night without sleep. The phone call from Detective Harper replayed in my head over and over. Someone at the department leaked your visit. They know you came to me. Those words felt like a chill running through my bones. Emily sat beside me, holding a thermos of coffee we'd bought days ago. It had gone cold, but she kept sipping it anyway, just for something to do. Her face looked pale. I could tell she was fighting back tears. Mom, she said softly, we can't keep running forever. What if we go to the press instead? What if we make it public so they can't silence us? I thought about that. It made sense, but it also scared me. Once we went public, there'd be no turning back. If we do that, I said slowly, we have to make sure we have everything, proof that no one can twist or erase. Emily nodded. Then let's go get it. She reached for her bag and pulled out her laptop. Even without internet, she downloaded enough documents and files to keep digging. Look at this, she said, turning the screen toward me. There were multiple names connected to Stonemark. Shell companies, offshore accounts, property transfers. All of these were signed off by Frank, but she scrolled down further and froze. Mom, look at this name. The name read Robert Lawson Trust. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My husband's name attached to a trust that had been active up until just 2 years ago. That's impossible, I whispered. He's been gone for over 20 years. Emily shook her head. It's not impossible. This trust was updated recently. Someone's been signing on his behalf, or her eyes widened, or he's alive. The world seemed to tilt again. My chest tightened and I had to grip the steering wheel to steady myself. I wanted to dismiss it, to tell her she was imagining things, but something inside me, something quiet and stubborn, refused to let go of the thought. We needed to know the truth. Emily found the address tied to the trust, a small cabin property registered under my husband's name in upstate New York. The same region where Frank had mentioned old friends helping him with the company years ago. Mom, Emily said, her voice trembling, if there's even a chance he's alive. I didn't let her finish. I turned the key in the ignition and started driving. The drive north took hours. The roads were long and winding, lined with trees wearing the last of their autumn leaves. Every mile closer made my heart race faster. I tried not to hope, but hope has a way of slipping in when you least expect it. We stopped only once for gas and snacks. Emily kept looking at the laptop, tracing maps and documents. I could see her father in her, that same quiet determination, that same curiosity that once made him spend nights at his desk, working by the dim light of a lamp. By the time we reached the address, the sky was turning orange. The cabin was small, almost hidden by tall pines, the windows covered in dust and the porch sagging from age. It didn't look lived in, but there was a car parked beside it. An old blue pickup, rusted but clean enough to look used. Emily gripped my hand. You ready? No, I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. We stepped up the porch and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I was about to turn away when I heard movement inside. Slow footsteps, the creak of a floorboard. Then the door opened just a crack. An older man stood there, his face partly in shadow. His hair was gray, his eyes tired, and he had a small scar on his chin, the same one my husband had gotten from falling off his bike when he was a boy. For a moment my world stopped. Robert, I whispered. The man stared at me for a long time, his eyes searching mine. Then he opened the door wider. Mary, he said quietly. His voice was deeper, rougher, but it was him. You shouldn't have come. Emily gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. Dad, it's really you. He looked at her, and for a brief second something like pride flickered across his face. You've grown up, he said softly, just like your mother. I stepped forward, my heart breaking and healing at the same time. They said you were dead, I thought. He shook his head. I had to disappear. I couldn't protect you both if I stayed. Emily's voice cracked. Protect us from what? Robert sighed, motioning us inside. The cabin smelled like old wood and coffee. Papers were spread out across a small table, a laptop open beside them. Frank, he said, and the people behind Stonemark, they weren't just stealing money, Mary. They were laundering it for politicians, for contractors. I tried to expose it. When they found out, they came after me. I felt sick. And you didn't tell me? You let us think you were gone? He looked at me. Pain etched in every line of his face. If I told you, they would have killed you too. Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling with anger and love all at once. You don't understand what it did to Mom. She lived half her life thinking she failed you. Robert's eyes softened. And I lived mine thinking I'd never see you again. For a moment none of us spoke. The only sound was the faint crackle of the fireplace. Then Robert took a deep breath. It's not over. Frank's still running things, but I have enough evidence now to bring him down for good. I just needed one last thing, the original documents I left behind. Emily and I looked at each other. We have them, she said. They're with Detective Harper. Robert's expression hardened. Then we have a problem. If Frank has people inside the department, Harper's not safe. Neither are you. He walked over to the table and opened a locked drawer. Inside was a small metal box. He placed it in front of me. This is everything else, the full ledger, names, accounts, signatures. It's enough to take them down permanently, but it has to go to someone you can trust completely outside the system. Emily frowned. Who? Robert smiled faintly. There's a journalist in D.C., Lauren Hayes. She was one of the few who believed me years ago. She can publish this safely. Before we could reply, there was a sharp knock on the door. Then another. 3 hard, deliberate knocks that made the floor vibrate. Robert's face went pale. They found us. Emily's hand went to her mouth. What do we do? Robert grabbed the box, shoved it into my hands, and whispered, Get out through the back. There's a path through the woods. Don't stop, no matter what. I hesitated, tears in my eyes. Robert, he looked at me, and for a moment I saw the man I fell in love with all those years ago. I'll find you again, I promise. The door shook as someone slammed against it. Robert turned, eyes blazing. Go! Emily and I ran through the back door, the cold air hitting us like a wave. Behind us, we heard voices shouting, the sound of glass breaking, then a single gunshot. Emily stopped, screaming, Dad! I grabbed her hand and pulled her forward, my heart breaking but my feet refusing to stop. The woods were dark, the branches clawing at our clothes as we ran. I didn't look back, I couldn't. When we finally reached the road, Emily fell to her knees sobbing. I held her tight, the metal box pressed against my chest. He's gone, she whispered. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. No, I said softly. He's still protecting us. The headlights of a car appeared in the distance. Harper's car. He stopped when he saw us, his face filled with shock and worry. Mary, he said, helping us in. What happened? I held up the box. We have everything, but they know. He started the engine. Then we finished this now. As we drove away from the burning glow of the cabin behind us, I realized something. My husband had spent his life fighting for truth, and now it was up to us to make sure that truth was finally seen. And I swore that no matter what it cost, I would. The next morning felt unreal. Emily and I hadn't slept. We were in a small roadside motel, our clothes still smelling faintly of smoke from the cabin. I sat on the edge of the bed with the metal box in my lap, staring at it as if it were something alive. It was heavy not just in weight, but in meaning. Inside was the truth my husband had risked everything to protect, the truth that had cost him his life. Emily sat across from me, her hair messy, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked so young again, like the little girl who used to sneak into our bed during thunderstorms. Except this storm was far from over. Mom, she said softly, do you think he made it out? I looked toward the window. The dawn light painted everything gray and quiet. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her that her father was alive somewhere, that we'd see him again. But deep down, I knew what that gunshot had meant. Still, hope has its own stubbornness. I don't know, sweetheart, I whispered, but we're going to finish what he started. Detective Harper met us an hour later in the motel parking lot. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, his car coated in mud from the back roads. When he saw the box, his eyes widened. You got it, he said, voice low. I nodded. Everything's in here. Names, accounts, connections. My husband was alive all these years collecting it. Harper took a deep breath. Then we can't go through the department anymore. If what you're saying is true, this goes higher than I thought. He looked around as if expecting someone to be watching. You mentioned a journalist? Lauren Hayes, Emily said quickly. Dad trusted her. He said she's the only one who can handle this safely. Harper rubbed his jaw. I know the name, she's solid, has contacts that even the feds respect, but getting to her means going to D.C., and they'll be watching every road between here and there. I felt that cold weight in my stomach again. So what do we do? Harper leaned closer. We go quiet. No phones, no cards, no contact. I'll take you as far as I can, but after that you'll need to disappear until this is public. Emily looked frightened, but she nodded. We'll do whatever it takes. We packed up and left the motel before the sun was fully up. The roads were nearly empty, just endless stretches of highway lined with fields and bare trees. Emily sat in the back, clutching the box like a lifeline. I sat up front beside Harper, staring out the window, my mind a blur of memories and fear. Hours passed in silence. The radio stayed off. Every time a car appeared behind us, Harper changed lanes or took an exit. It felt like we were ghosts slipping through the world unseen. By evening, we reached a small town just outside D.C. Harper pulled into a quiet diner parking lot. "This is where I leave you," he said. "There's a bus station 2 blocks over. Take the late-night route into the city. I'll make sure your trail gets covered." Emily reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she said. He nodded, looking at me. "Your husband was a brave man, Mary. He didn't die for nothing. Make sure the truth gets out." We left him there and walked toward the bus station, the air cold and damp with the smell of rain. I could feel my heart beating so hard it hurt. Every face around us felt like it could be watching. But when we finally boarded the bus and found 2 seats in the back, something inside me loosened. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of relief. The city came into view hours later, lights glowing through the fog like tiny stars. Emily was asleep on my shoulder, her breathing soft. I held her close and whispered, "We're almost there." We found Lauren Hayes' office in an old building near the Capitol. It was quiet, the kind of place where truth lived in whispers. Lauren herself answered the door. She looked older than I remembered from the few pictures I'd seen. Silver hair tied back, sharp eyes that carried the weight of too many stories. "Mary Lawson," she said softly, almost like a question. "He told me if I ever saw you, the story was ready." My chest tightened. "You knew he was alive?" She nodded. "He reached out to me a few times, said he was close. I didn't hear from him again after last week. I feared the worst." I placed the metal box on her desk. "It's all here, everything he gathered." Lauren opened the box carefully, her hands steady. As she sifted through the papers, her expression shifted from curiosity to shock. "This," she whispered, "this could take down half the state's leadership." Emily leaned forward. "Then do it, publish it. Let everyone see what they did." Lauren looked up at us. "Once this goes out, you both need to disappear. These people won't go quietly." I nodded. "We're ready." She spent hours scanning and photographing documents, sending encrypted files to her contacts. The sun had started to rise again by the time she leaned back in her chair. "It's done. Within the hour, this will hit every major outlet in the country." Emily smiled for the first time in days. "We did it." But then the phone on Lauren's desk rang. Once, twice, 3 times. She glanced at it and frowned. "No one should have this number." I felt my stomach twist. "Don't answer," but she already had. "Lauren Hayes," she said cautiously. There was a pause. Then her face went pale. She put the phone on speaker. Frank's voice filled the room. "You should have stayed quiet, Mary," he said. His tone was calm, almost kind. "You could have lived the rest of your life in peace. But now you force my hand." Emily stood up, trembling. "You destroyed everything. You killed my father." Frank laughed, a cold sound. "Your father? Oh, sweetheart, your father destroyed himself, and now you're going to join him." The line went dead. Lauren looked at me. "We need to leave, now." We rushed out of the office, down the stairwell, and into the cold morning air. Cars were already pulling up across the street, black sedans with tinted windows. "Run!" Lauren shouted. We darted down an alley, our breath visible in the chill. I could hear footsteps behind us, shouts echoing through the narrow walls. My lungs burned, but I kept running. Emily was ahead of me, clutching my hands so tightly it hurt. At the end of the alley, a car screeched to a stop. The door flew open and Detective Harper leaned out. "Get in!" We dove inside and the car sped off, tires screaming against the pavement. Harper glanced at us through the mirror. "They're everywhere. But don't worry, it's too late. The files went public 5 minutes ago." Emily gasped. "What?" He smiled grimly. "It's all over the news. Frank's done." I turned to the window, my heart pounding. Behind us, the city lights blurred as we sped through them. And for the first time in years, I felt something powerful. Not fear, not grief, but freedom. Robert's truth was out. He had saved us all, even from beyond the grave. Emily leaned her head against my shoulder, crying softly. "He did it, Mom. Dad did it." I held her close and whispered, "No, sweetheart, we did it." Outside, the first light of dawn broke through the clouds. It felt like the whole world was waking up again. The first rays of morning light spread across the city skyline like a soft promise that the night was truly over. But for me and Emily, it didn't feel like an ending. Not yet. The car hummed quietly as Detective Harper drove us away from downtown. News alerts buzzed from his phone again and again. He finally pulled over on the side of a quiet road and handed it to me. The screen was full of headlines. "Massive corruption scandal exposed at Stonemark Holdings. Whistleblower evidence reveals political laundering tied to state officials. Frank Morrison under federal investigation." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My husband's name wasn't there, not in the headlines, not in the photos. But in every story, I saw his shadow, the years he spent hiding, collecting proof, risking everything for this moment. He did it, I whispered. Robert finally did it. Emily smiled weakly beside me. No, Mom, she said softly. You did it too. You kept fighting even when it broke you. I reached for her hand, and for the first time in years, I felt a kind of peace settle in my chest. A quiet, steady peace that said it was worth it. Harper turned in his seat to face us. You two can't go home yet. Frank's people will be scrambling, and it's not safe until the feds make arrests. I nodded. Where do we go? He smiled faintly. Somewhere quiet. I know a place by the coast. A friend owns a small house out there. You'll be safe. The drive took most of the day. The city faded into open fields and then into winding coastal roads lined with tall grass and sound of distant waves. When we finally stopped, I stepped out and smelled the sea air. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. The house was small and weathered, but it felt alive, like it had been waiting for someone to fill it with laughter again. Emily opened the windows, letting the ocean breeze in. For the first time in a long while, we didn't feel like we were running. That night we sat by the fire. The flames danced in the reflection of Emily's eyes as she read through one of the last letters her father had written, the one we found hidden in the box, folded neatly under all the documents. She read it aloud, her voice trembling. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't come back to you. But know that not a single day passed without me loving you both. I did what I had to do, not because I didn't trust you, but because I couldn't bear to see the world take you away from me. One day when the truth comes out, I hope you'll forgive me for leaving. And I hope you'll remember that strength runs in your blood, your mother's strength. She's the bravest person I've ever known. Emily's voice broke. He was talking about you, Mom. Tears filled my eyes, but they weren't heavy this time. They were light, cleansing. He was talking about us, sweetheart. We both made it here. The next few weeks passed in quiet recovery. Lauren Hayes' article spread everywhere. Stonemark Holdings collapsed, and Frank Morrison was arrested along with several state officials. The truth Robert had given his life for finally saw daylight. Reporters tried to reach out to me and Emily, but we stayed silent. This wasn't about fame or recognition. This was about closure, about peace. Then one afternoon, as the tide rolled in and the seagulls cried overhead, Harper arrived at the beach house. He looked tired but relieved. It's done, he said. Frank took a deal. He confessed to everything. The feds closed the case. Emily hugged him tightly. Thank you for believing us, he smiled. Your father would have been proud. When he left, I walked down to the water alone. The wind whipped through my hair and the sound of the ocean filled the silence around me. I thought about the girl I used to be, the young wife who believed life would always be simple, the mother who thought love alone could keep a family whole, and the woman who stood in a courtroom facing lies and corruption. And now, standing here, I realized I had become something I never thought I could be. Not just a survivor, but a fighter. Emily joined me, slipping her hand into mine. What do we do now? She asked quietly. I smiled. We live. We build something new, something honest. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Dad would have liked that, I nodded. He's here, you know. In every wave, every gust of wind, he's free now. We stood there until the sky turned pink and gold, the sun melting into the sea. I felt the warmth on my face and closed my eyes, letting it sink deep into me, the peace, the pain, the gratitude. Later that evening, as the stars began to fill the sky, Emily brought out one last thing, a small wooden box with Robert's name carved on the lid. Inside were the letters, the photos, and a few mementos from his old life. We carried it down to the water's edge, our feet sinking into the wet sand. Goodbye, Dad, Emily whispered. I added softly, Thank you, my love. We opened the box and let the wind take the papers one by one into the sea. They danced above the waves before vanishing into the horizon, carrying his memory into the world he helped save. And in that moment, I knew that even though life had broken us 100 times, love had put us back together stronger each time. The past was painful, but it had shaped us. The truth had freed us, and my husband's courage and mine had become a legacy my daughter would carry forever. That night before we went to bed, Emily hugged me tightly. Mom, she said, I used to think you ruined my life. But now I know you saved it." I smiled through my tears and kissed her forehead. "That's what mothers do, sweetheart, even when it hurts." The waves crashed softly outside as we turned out the lights, and for the first time in years I fell asleep without fear, knowing that tomorrow we would wake to a world where truth had finally won. End of story.